I've been married, as you may know, 3 times, and incredibly blessed over periods, therefore, of 18 years, and 7 years, with a wonderful wife. Not the same wife all the way through, but there you go. And I've been aware that so many of God's children have not had such wonderful, blessed experience of partnership that loves and quite honestly meets all their needs. Physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, whatever you call it, meets all the needs because of an intense relationship. I mean, with whichever wife I had, we were closer than close. Nothing was worth doing without the other. Nothing was considered to be done without the other, only incredibly grudgingly, because in some sense it would be the greater blessing. And I've been aware that so many people have not had this comfort, this fullness of life. I mean, we've been Christian as well, or you could say it was our expression of the Christianity. And I've said elsewhere, and you know, this was not putting God first, as I understand it now in hindsight, but the partner first, which is a mistake. But I was aware very much too that mistake it may be, but compared to feeling the loneliness of isolation of neither a wonderful partner nor God, I was so concerned. I did not like the way that, the single, so often, and the unhappily married, are dismissed as sinful because they might, in their loneliness and their unmet needs, resort to the imagination of the heart and greatly assisted, I might say, by pornography and so on. The traditional religion, especially Christianity, sees the modern growth industry that's funded the internet of pornography. This has arisen from the great need of the 20th century in Western societies especially, for partnership that they don't have, the lack of it, and the needs that are not met. You know, in a society that has true community and almost a universality of marriage of its members, basic needs are met, physical needs are met, emotional and relational needs are met through the family that has been so increasingly decaying and marked by its absence in the 20th and now spectacularly in the 21st century. Isolation and loneliness. And I can almost see pornography as coming to the rescue. Christianity sees it as a sin. I see it as a provision of God. To meet the needs of those whose needs are not met by more fortunate and blessed circumstances. And since I've been alone for the last, 7 years now, I suppose. I mean, alone in the physical partnership sense, with no longer having a wife. I've realised more the reality of such what we might see as tragic circumstances of the 21st century. So many people alone, not partnered with a mate, quite honestly, quite simply. And in their plight, we condemn them as in error. It's a bit like blaming the unemployed for not being able to work, when there are, quite obviously, a great insufficiency of job opportunities there to employ them all. We blame the victim instead of the circumstance. We blame the person with addiction for the addiction instead of blaming the circumstance of the lack of meeting their need that's driving the need for the addiction. What should we be warring against? Not the victim at all, but the adverse circumstances that are making this a necessary rescue, albeit rather inadequate, but you see, look, you kid yourself, whether you've got a partner or not, it's not enough. It's nothing like your relationship that should be with God. Nothing like. Doesn't touch it. You can be as in love with one of the other children on the planet, you know, not a fellow human being, a partner, as you can be. It's not like being in love with the completeness and the fullness of our infinite God. The first commandment, to love God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength, is the only rational thing if you are considering, the only rational principle rather than commandment. If you are considering the necessity or the option, the possibility of life eternal and its completeness. It is that possibility that Jesus speaks of that validates the first commandment as a principle, not as a commandment at all, of course, as a principle of life, the principle of life, life eternal. That no one but a madman would not do this. Only a madman would not embrace love against God with all his heart, soul, mind and strength, if his God is able and willing to give life eternal to him. And I hold that he is, perhaps because of the story of Jesus. I think possibly that's so. But I also think possibly that's what I've understood the story of Jesus to be, especially from something like John 17. It's because I've felt this, that I've been willing to see it in the Jesus story. I was struck today at a Saturday Christian fellowship that I could give them a piece of scripture and still they would not take hold of it because it didn't match with their theology. It really is the case of those that have ears to hear, and those that haven't, who are worshipping with all their heart something else, cannot hear. And these good and well-intentioned, or at least earnest, most earnest, and principled persons actually can't hear the words of Jesus. They hear only their doctrine, which is more easily confirmed by study of the Torah, are utterly contradicted by the teaching of Jesus. But they only hear of Jesus, what confirms the Torah. This is an astonishing mistake. And I do mean mistake because, well, they're so earnest, yet so wrong. I need to pause here and review what I've dictated in this recording. Hang on a minute. I must stop mincing words. I was struck by overwhelming thankfulness to God at some point after the meeting that just as I had hoped that pornography was actually a rescue for the plight of the isolated, lonely, unmarried person that's, if you like, not entirely embracing yet the fullness of God's presence with him as Heavenly Father, and whose being longs for a partner and doesn't have one, both physically longs from the sexual point of view, and overwhelmingly from a relational point of view, to the extent, I was going to say that God has not filled that gap for him. But God, of course, infinitely more than fills such a gap by his full presence, if one can only increase one's consciousness to embrace such. And whilst we're doing that, whilst we're not at that exalted state, we may suffer without a partner the needs we have not being met. Physically, pin-ups and so on may meet that. I mean, even masturbation and so on may meet that. I don't have such a desire. I have a desire for physical sexual relationship, but not self-imposed climax-wise, masturbation, not that. I suppose I speak this in my defense. I don't wish to defend myself on reflection, because I wish to reach out to those who feel unclean or sinful because they do, say, masturbate or watch extremes of porn that I would find utterly repellent. I am so thankful that my God allows all that he allows of what a traditional Christian religion would see as evil, but that I maintain he allows in his loving kindness and great blessing, given an inadequate grasp of his full goodness and blessing and loveliness by our own consciousness, which is doing all this consciousness of ours to bring to a full maturity and completeness in himself, what we would call enlightenment, a full embrace in our understanding and being of life eternal. So now I do not see the pornographic industry as some terrible wicked evil. I see it as a sort of temporary prop-up, a lifeline to persons who would otherwise be too plagued by needs not met. Again, you see, I see the situation of man not as part of some sinful wickedness of fallen man, but as something that's a help, a rescue in his temporary plight of not yet knowing the fullness of God. Am I claiming then that I do not know the fullness of God? Yeah, of course. I have magnificent days now of God's blessing on me, awareness of it. I mean, you too are having the same blessing, just so you're not aware of it. But I'm still inadequate. I'm still not remotely the completeness and fullness of God. I will be, because he is able and loving and willing and will do. But I do know I'm not quite there yet, to put it mildly. And you may say after listening to this recording, my goodness, if there's one thing you're right on, Marshall, is that. Good. You've not found me to be some wonderful, magnificent, awe-inspiring avatar and guru. Of course not. Just someone like yourself whom God can speak through and minister to others through without being something superior to and beyond yourself. Something to be so admired and revered that we're of no earthly help. He's not only sent us into the world because it will be a greater blessing in us than through us, and he loves us. He's also sent us into the world in this way, because it's a lovely way as he sees it, of bringing each other to the fullness of glory. You see, he doesn't even want to take the glory, the credit, for the all that he must be. For without him, there would be nothing, not even the nothing. Our God is quite simply wonderful. And he tells us that we are his children. And that means that you and I, in terms of eternity, the eternal realm that God inhabits and is and holds within himself, that in that realm, in his being, we are of him, born of God. Can you just pick up the trace of how wonderful that possible reality is? Bless you. Thank you, Dad. Yeah, well, I got to about 9 minutes through this recording and I realised I must say this. The need for what traditional view of these being addictions, they fall away the closer you come to God, which gives you an idea of how not close I am to God. I mean, me, Marshall in particular. I'm not claiming I'm there. I'm simply saying that the more you become aware, conscious of the fullness of God, the more your needs evaporate. All need evaporates in the realization of God. The ultimate realization, you see. In the meantime, you have needs. And you'll prop yourself up with meeting those needs in such way as you feel is best. One day I will not need to eat food at all. At present, I need to eat and have nourishment, physical food. I'd find, by the grace of God, I don't need to kill to eat in the obvious way, anyway, of eating bodies of dead animals. I don't have to do that by the grace of God, so I don't. But I still need to eat. I still, if you like, need to cultivate plants, or have them cultivated for me, and eat fruits and so forth. And this undoubtedly causes havoc on the planet. Our agriculture is an incredible scar and invasion on the surface of the planet. No more, one could say, than native bush and jungle and so on, because that too is, an endless turmoil, irritation, scratch, warring on the surface, isn't it? I mean, in a sense, you can see it as that. I don't want to be too graphic, because it will seem silly to you because it's so normal. But life is struggling with life, something terrible, everywhere you look. Don't want to get you depressed on this point. I won't linger on it. But simply to say that these, whether it's alcohol or drugs or pornography or whatever it is, or anger or they're all, in some sense, temporary solutions to help you get through. They are not good in themselves. They are simply a help temporarily in the difficulties, whilst you are not fully enlightened. You're not to see them as a curse. There is no curse with God. Let's say it again. There is no curse in the reality of my God. I may see it as such. I may condemn it as such. But this is not the reality with my God. The kiddie doesn't want to eat some certain food which the parent knows to be nourishing. The kiddie sees it as a bad, doesn't want to eat this. The parent may, in their misguided love, insist the child eats it. And the child is not happy with the parent as a consequence, and it starts to spoil the relationship between them. Even though, of course, the parent would be doing it out of love and kindness. In the transitory we may impose. We're imperfect parents. Our God does not impose, but he does allow consequences of the things that are keeping us apart, and the consequence is that we are apart by some of the things we do. And we learn the hard way, but we do learn. And that validates, in some sense, if it's necessary, for us to gain life eternal. You may feel it's a hard call on us, this life experience of being not fully into life eternal. But perhaps God understands it to be necessary to get us from non-being to eternal being. You see, that's the incredible miracle, isn't it? That you did not exist, and you come to exist eternally in eternity, past, present, and future, from nothing, where nothing to be something that existed at all. Which in some sense is not so, because he brings it into eternal being, and therefore cancels what it could otherwise have been, but now never was and never will be. We're talking about a miracle of God. What he implies, utterly beyond our comprehension. See, my dad can do anything, and does. You may think this is a very elementary type of faith, but it is what the purity of the child is. And except you be as little children, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. This is what's so beautiful about the youngest of children. Their incredible innocence of trust. They are living as if there is no care in the world, ideally. Whilst the parent rather anxiously looks after them. Not too anxiously, actually. And that's what our society tries to achieve. As little anxiety for the parents as possible. That the race becomes a race of angels. I didn't know that was coming. Love you, Dad. May this be the blessing that you intend, Father. May I have the courage to publish it too. Thank you, Dad.